Efforts to ban books at American libraries and schools have nearly doubled in 2022. The culture wars, according to the American Library Association, more than 2,500 books have been targeted, the highest number in 20 years. And there's a common theme among the most challenged books. They involve LGBTQ issues and books written by or about people of color. Joining me now is Maryland Governor Wes Moore, who is calling on book publishers not to censor books, along with 9 other Democratic governors. And you took on this issue. We're seeing textbooks being banned, not just Florida and Texas, but now in a lot of red states. And textbooks involving commonly heralded authors, many black authors and other historians of black history.
They are, and there's a reason why myself and these other governors have stepped up on this issue. It's not just because, you know, banning The Bluest Eye or banning Beloved or banning books about Stonewall or Japanese internment that it's not consistent with our values. It's also dangerous because our history is our strength. You've got to be able to know where you're coming from to get an understanding of where we are going. And I think about this, you know, really in the sense of context of what we're all hoping to achieve and hoping to accomplish. Because when people say, well, we are pulling back or curtailing a curriculum because we don't want people to feel bad, or we don't want people to feel disgruntled about their past, that's not true. This has nothing to do about making people feel bad. It's about making sure that people don't understand their strength. The reason that I move the way that I do is because I know my history. I know where I've come from, both my family and my history and my culture. And so that gives me the power to know that nothing is impossible. And that's why it's important to make sure that our history is protected and that people have a chance to be able to understand just how powerful our history and our national arc has been in order for people to feel empowered about what they can get done in the future.
It's actually as important to educate white people as people of color about their own history.
That's exactly right. And to show that, you know, the arc of our country's history has been uneven. And in many cases, it's been brutal. Yet at the same time, we're still here. And we still continue to advance together. And that's the power of understanding our own collective history.
Let me give you just a small example, just one personal example. I was talking about this issue with a colleague just in the last day who said that she was a history major, her husband was a history major, very well-educated people, and is ashamed that she did not know about Tulsa until the 100th anniversary, and there was so much coverage, contemporary coverage about, you know, what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's right.
An entire community was wiped out with an aerial attack from the United States of America.
And if we don't understand that history, as is said, you're doomed to repeat it. You're doomed to not be able to take away the lessons learned and to know how empowered you are. When we had our inauguration, I immediately, and I was very intentional about starting our inauguration down at the Annapolis docks when I was inaugurated to become the governor. The Annapolis docks was one of the oldest slave ports in the history of the United States. And we did a wreath laying, and then we marched. A couple hundred people marched from the docks up to the State House, where I was sworn in to become the 63rd governor. And immediately when people said, well, he's starting his inauguration, he's starting his governorship with indoctrination, that's not indoctrination. It's history. And it wasn't done to make people feel bad. It was done in a way of making all of us feel empowered about look where we've come from and look where we are now.
Weren't you sworn in on Frederick Douglass's historic Bible?
I was. And again, another very intentional thing. There was 2 Bibles that I was sworn in on. One was my grandfather's Bible, and he was the first black minister in the history of the Dutch Reformed Church. And the second was the Bible of Frederick Douglass, who was also a Marylander. And so I was honored that the family allowed me to use his Bible as the one that I was sworn in on.
In fact, he was enslaved on the Eastern Shore and imprisoned for trying to run away.
That's right.
And wrote about it.
And that's history.
I want to talk about the campaign in this context, then. Tim Scott has an extraordinary history, and he is running partly on his biography, partly on the optimism he projects as almost a Reagan, if I may, a Reagan-type Republican optimism. And he had a very interesting conversation on The View about his belief that there is no such thing as systemic racism. Let's watch.
You have indicated that you don't believe in systemic racism. What is your definition of systemic racism?
Let me answer the question that you've answered.
Or does it even exist in your mind?
Let me answer the question this way. One of the things I think about, and one of the reasons why I'm on the show, is because of the comments that were made, frankly, on this show, that the only way for a young African-American kid to be successful in this country is to be the exception and not the rule. That is a dangerous, offensive, disgusting message to send to our young people today, that the only way to succeed is by being the exception.
Now, I know Senator Scott, and I know how, he's very popular with his colleagues, and I think he had an extraordinary launch of his campaign. But that is one of his big theories. That's one of his beliefs, I should say. Yeah. How would you respond to that?
I respond to, while I understand his point, what his thesis is not true. We are existing in a framework where you can understand the current situation if you do not understand our past. We can't look at the fact that right now, for example, in the state of Maryland, we have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap, right? We don't have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap because one group worked 8 times harder. That's not what happened. You can't understand why there's a wealth gap unless you understand things like redlining, and where you had literally people being separated on where they were living and where they could live and where they could buy property, depending on their skin color. You can't understand a racial wealth gap if you don't understand transportation lines that were deliberately built and put in place that were used to separate people and create access and mobility for certain groups and a lack of access and no mobility for other groups. You cannot understand a racial wealth gap unless you understand educational systems that were intentionally used to create measurements of separation. Now, we have to, if we're not willing to acknowledge our past, we're not going to be able to have a productive conversation about the future. There are measures of intentionality that have created the type of social systems that we exist in to this day. And so we have to be able to have a measure of intentionality to be able to unearth those systems and create a measurement where you can have economic and societal growth for all and not just some people.
Obviously, Ron DeSantis, in using these issues in Florida and now in his national campaign, has weaponized it and feels that it's very effective against Democrats.
I just don't see how it's going to be a political win to separate people. I don't see how it's going to be a political win to tell certain people that your history is less relevant, your history is less important. Your history has less of a context to the larger mosaic of this beautiful tapestry, which is the United States. I know in the state of Maryland, we are very clear that we are not going to be a state that thinks we're going to build a model based on going after our largest corporations, based on a model of telling women that the difficult decision between them and their doctor now should involve delegates and state senators. And we're not going to be a state that is going to focus on telling people that learning about the Holocaust or Roberto Clemente or Hank Aaron is somehow detrimental to the educational success of our children. We believe that in order for all people to be seen, it means all people must be heard and acknowledged. And that's what we think is going to be not just the right thing for us in the state of Maryland, but I think it's also the way that they should focus on trying to win political elections as well.
Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, it's always great to see you.
It's great.
I know you've got a busy schedule, but come back soon.
I sure will. Thank you.